Okay, we should probably get started. Now, I just want to repeat the announcement I made this morning, and it was in regard to the last session, which Idam and I will be doing. And Idam will begin the last session. I'm talking about Thursday, not last section. Sorry, last session. So on Thursday in the afternoon, Idam will start off by providing some of the case studies from his own research that focuses on traditional forms of non of conflict transformation. And instead of me speaking, as I said in the morning class, I think almost all of you would be quite sick of listening to me. So I shall say very little in the last session, and instead, I want to invite all of you to present from your own cultures traditional forms of conflict transformation. And what I might do is, if I feel inspired tomorrow morning, I'll type in a few examples. But do a bit of your own research at the moment if you are not familiar with your own, cultures, and and come prepared to speak about these various traditional forms and or indigenous forms of conflict transformation and peace building. All right. Now it gives me tremendous pleasure. Yesterday I introduced two members of our Castellon gang. That's Jenny, Ejin, and Carlos, and this is the third member of the group. And Dr. Bustamante, who we affectionately, call him Gigio,
Yeah.
and as Carlos and Ejin, I've known Gigio quite a number of years, and I won't say much about his own work, and he will probably tell you a bit about that. But I should also say that I've had the enormous pleasure of reading his PhD as one of the reviewers. And the, you know, after reading it, I was just thinking that, gosh, this is the guy that I knew all this while and for the last 10 years or so. But reading his work, it provided so much sort of insights about
Mm.
him. And he's going to talk about some of his work that he has expressed so beautifully in his thesis, but also this concept of love. And when we speak about love, I can't think of any better person to present on this topic than this lovely guy called Gigio. So, Gigio is all yours.
Well, thank you so much for your introduction, Alberto. It's really nice to be here in this course with you. It feels really great to have finished that research and be able to share with everyone. Um, for those who I haven't met yet, hello. I see some familiar faces in here, but maybe without further ado, I will start sharing screen with my presentation, then we can start. Yeah. So PowerPoint. Okay, can you hear me well? I have the chat in here. I'm going to close the chat, otherwise I cannot focus on the presentation. Okay, so if there is anything and if you cannot hear me, would someone be kind enough to just unmute and let me know? That would be great. So, okay, today we're going to talk about empathy, love, compassion, and peace. Well, in the framework of an international course on conflict transformation and peace building, and I think that is important to bear in mind. Yeah, but before we start, I'd like to briefly just mention what is the plan for the session. And sorry, and I might have packed a little bit too much, but we'll see how we progress, yeah, in terms of time. And if not, I'll share the presentation with you anyways for you to have an idea of what I was going to try to cover. But I'd love to start with a very short active listening activity. I think you have done this before with Jenny Murphy in her presentation, right? And I think it's a tradition and quite important that we give ourselves this 5 minutes time of just taking a deep breath and then allowing ourselves to be present for other people and for the course in itself. So with this practice, maybe I can ask Zikri to do breakout rooms. So 2 people per breakout room. Could you do that?
On it.
Great. Thank you, Zikri. Oh, and I haven't explained it. There was an assumption that from my side that you're more or less familiar. But the idea of active listening is just really to share with each other like how you're doing, how your day, so that you can really just name and voice the whatever is in your mind and the feelings that you're having, so that you can then put it aside for a second and just come back and be present for the course. Yeah. Great.
Okay, the
What?
what happened?
Uh, um, I think he haven't connections to us
Bukan.
because he's not here yet.
Okay, I think we're going to come back to the breakout rooms for active listening right now.
Give me a second to arrange the participants.
Fantastic. Thank you, Adi.
Hi, Zikri. So, are we two in a single room?
You could move to room 6.
I can't hear you. Your voice is breaking.
Okay, okay, I'll send you to the other rooms. Room 16.
Hello, Zikri.
You could join with Saddam in room 16. I already assigned you.
Room 16. So, do I have to join this room?
Yeah, the room 16 with Saddam. Is it the notification already? Ah,
of the practice. Okay, I think that we are all back. I'm going to share my screen again. And I just want to explain a little bit of why we do this. In general, it's a good thing that before we enter a meeting, a presentation, but also especially if you're going to be mediating a conflict, that you give yourself this 2 minutes of time to recenter, rebalance before you enter a conversation with someone, just for the sake of being able to be fully present. And this is something that ideally you self-prepare in whenever entering a conflict mediation or even just a regular course. But since it's a good practice, I always like to bring it to our session, just for you to experiment a little bit. And it's that simple, really. So I think that now, past active listening, I just added again the session plan so that you have a general idea of what we'll be covering. I'm going to talk a little bit of how I started to do this research and how I went from international relations to peace studies. And I started researching on the idea of love. Yeah. So I'd love to ask for someone to read this quotation from us. Can I have a volunteer? You can just unmute and run.
Yeah, may I?
Yes, of course. I don't know who is going to read it, but if you say your name.
That's Rafia.
Oh, Rafia, yes, now I can see you.
While many modern sociologists and psychologists viewed the phenomena of hatred, crime, war, and mental disorders as legitimate objects for scientific study, they quite illogically stigmatized as theological preaching or non-scientific speculation any investigation of the phenomena of love, friendship, heroic deeds, and creative genius. This patently unscientific position of many of my colleagues is merely a manifestation of the prevalent concentration on the negative, pathological, and subhuman phenomena, typical of the disintegration phase of our sensate culture.
Thank you so much, Rafia. So this was written by Sorokin in 1954, only a few years after the World Wars. And we are 70 years after that, and we haven't been able to address love in a serious manner in academia in general. Yeah. So before I actually start talking about love, I think because it's such a problematic topic to discuss, I'd like to give you a brief contextualization of where I come from and how I came to this. So I was born in Brazil in the 80s, which was then under a dictatorship that was marked by violence. You can see the picture in here of the brutality of military police enforcement on the upper picture, right? It was a government marked by corruption. Brazil is one of the most unequal countries in the world. I mean, there was plenty of social repression in terms of artistic expression, but also a feature of the dictatorship was the indigenous assimilationism. So what it meant was that all our indigenous communities that we had in the country were under a process of assimilation to Western culture. And this is the picture that I have in here of an indigenous community being disciplined by the military. And of course, in the context of the dictatorship, there was a strong border control on top of a colonial history. And what that means is that if you were raised in Brazil at that time, you had very little opportunity to be in contact with other cultures, either cultures that would flourish in the geographical context within the borders of Brazil or elsewhere. Okay, and what does it mean for a little boy? You can see this little boy over here to be born in Rio, actually across from the bay from Rio, and moved to this small town in the mountains called Nova Friburgo. Well, my family that you can see up in here was a witness to a lot of the violence of the dictatorship and how people had relatives that would disappear and never come back again, people that would suffer torture. And so my family learned very well that for us, in order to protect ourselves, it was really important that we kept quiet and that we did not voice our concerns, etc., and interests and defense of different cultures and different perspectives. And this really marked my family in many ways. And as I was growing up with the end of the dictatorship and all the democratic movements that you can see in the left picture in here, there is this, I forgot how you say the name of that in English, but this billboard that says amanhã vai ser outro dia. It means tomorrow will be another day and we're going to get over this violence and this dictatorship. And as I was graduating from high school, and here you can see me doing a speech with my best friend Dan, I realized that what I was really interested in was learning about different cultures and engaging with other people, after having been raised in a context in which there was no access to it. So I went to study international relations in the Catholic University of Rio in this beautiful setting. It's like this buildings in the middle of the Atlantic rainforest, and sometimes I would be in class and see, little monkeys outside, but it was supposed to be a joy and to be in contact with different cultures, right? But it turns out that international relations is not about culture. It has never been about culture. In fact, international relations as the discipline was devised was a theory on the behavior of nation states that a theorist calls imagined communities, which appear in the context of Europe around the 1600s and was spread through colonization. So it was really frustrating that I was so eager to get to know the world, and we're talking about power politics in the nation state and not about other communities, right? Even if they are imagined. So maybe I should have studied anthropology instead. But the problem is that in Brazil, there's no course on anthropology for the undergraduate level. So you have to do a master's in anthropology and study something else. But anyways, this is what I studied, which was international relations, and a discipline that, as I explained to you, first appeared after World War I in the University of Aberystwyth, which is in Wales. And basically this discipline was interested into responding to the violence of World War I and become normative by avoiding war and creating democratic mechanisms of prevention and control. That is when the discipline coincides with the creation of the League of Nations, which then will fail, of course, because of World War II, but then will be the blueprint for the United Nations. So the discipline is born in a context of idealism that we can avoid war and violence. And there was, of course, a very strong reaction to that, which was possibly the main theoretical strain of international relations, which is realism. But the problem is that realist authors are not dealing with reality in itself, but we tend to forget that they are talking about their own understanding of reality. And it's an understanding of reality that is deeply marked by pessimism. And if you read the Morgenthau book, I don't really recommend you reading it. Politics Among Nations. And then the subtitle is The Struggle for Power and Peace. And I underscore the struggle for power because that's what really the book is about. The understanding of peace comes from having access to power in the form of military programs, in the form of nuclear power. And that is detrimental to any actual understanding of peace. And then we have also Edward Carr considering that peace is a utopia. So what realism really is, it's not about reality, but on pessimistic and cynical views of reality. I mean, it's understandable if you have suffered the violence of war, you can understand, you realize what we are able to do ourselves. But that's not necessarily objective because we can do more than just war. Okay, so this is basically how the discipline of international relations is formed. And it's important to say that there are several other theoretical perspectives within international relations, yeah, which I'm not covering because that's not really the topic of today's course. And of course, there are post-colonial and decolonial critiques that have for a very long time been posing critiques to international relations and international politics, and also alternatives, yeah. But since I have studied IR, and I had a specific interest in culture, I had to situate myself, both in terms of cultural context, but also politically understanding the resource that I had, and how could I pursue the interest that I had. And my research basically shifts towards peace. And within peace studies during the master's here and then the PhD, I was able to develop a little bit the idea of love. And of course, considering that I live here in Europe, in Spain, and considering the accessibility of resources and materials to read, I base the idea of love within the context of Europe, more or less the West. And just to go back to IR a little bit, it's important to understand that as international relations within this context of the word is understood as part of the social sciences, which in turn is modeled after the natural sciences. It means that scientific knowledge will be held as the most important one, or possibly the only valid one. And that in itself is a problem, because basically understanding, knowing, and learning is only done through our minds, through cognition, through knowledge. And all other human faculties are relegated to lower realms. And what is the problem of this? Is that this is, non-surprisingly, another form of colonialism, because only white men were able to think rationally and critically. Women and the uncivilized, as European men considered, were not able to possess rationality. And we still nowadays reproduce this kind of mentality that we consider, oh, women, they cannot think critically enough, they are not objective. So it's really important that we become aware of sometimes how rooted our own personal assumptions are in a history of violence, all right? And despite this tragic history, within the context of Europe, there are people that try to respond differently to what it means to be a human being and how we get to know. Can I ask someone else to read this quotation from Jung below?
Yeah, can I?
Yes, of course.
Under sensation, I include all perceptions by means of sense organs. By thinking, I mean the function of intellectual cognition and the forming of logical conclusions. Feeling is a function of subjective valuation, intuition. I take as perception by way of unconscious, or perception of unconscious contents.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So what we're starting to see is that there are more ways of knowing than just using our mind, right? And the thing is, other cultures never fractured human experience the way that they did in Europe. We don't have to only think to be human beings. In fact, sometimes we must be able to feel things. We must be able to be touched, literally be touched and be affected bodily wise in order to learn, right? And this is important to realize that there are more ways of knowing is important, because in a conflict setting, a mediator really needs to be able to be talking to different people who engage with the world and learn from the world and also communicate in different ways. Um, of course, this should not be taken in consideration alone. It's important that we are aware that there are cultural differences, there are differences in terms of identity, religion, gender, that really matter in a conflict. But our, individual uniqueness is important to be considered whenever we are trying to do negotiations, especially mediating conflicts. Because if we forget about the people who are in the room, we're most probably not going to leave this room and this space with those people feeling um, what's the word for that? Satisfied, basically satisfied, really, with whatever it is the negotiation that you're doing. And since basically we're already opening the door for us to consider that there are different ways with which we engage with the world, I would love to propose a 10 minutes free writing prompt. And in this 10 minutes, I'd first ask you to look back at your life and try to consider which is your primary way of interpreting the world. Maybe it can be through sensing, which means knowing through the sensations of the body. So what this actually means is that, especially if you do sports or you do dance, there is a way of paying attention to the sensations of the body that allow you to grasp whatever you're experiencing in that very moment. And that is a very important resource, because when you're in a stressful situation and you might have this tendency to respond with escaping the space. That is a natural bodily reaction that is important for self-preservation, especially when you might be under context of direct violence. So that is the intelligence of the body in many ways. Likewise, we also have feelings. And I think that we get to know the world and wherever we are, whenever we are processing what it is that we are feeling and connected to our emotional database. Of course, this is natural. We always bring in a more or less conscious or not so much way how the sensing and feeling, we process it and we bring to our awareness, to our intellect. But there are also other ways of knowing and understanding where we are at the moment, such as assessing our intuition. We might really have a grasp of reality that is based on something that is beyond our own intellect, which is like it's a voice that comes through to us. And then there might be other ways of knowing that you might want to explore, which is spiritual, for example. And so what I'd like you to do is give yourself 10 minutes to really look back and see if there's a more predominant way of interpreting and knowing the world. And also on point B, if you can recall any particular situation in which you have experienced some misunderstanding with interaction with people, possibly because of these different ways of engaging. And if you can devise imbalances in each of these forms of knowing. By imbalances, I actually mean whether there's any of them that could be a little bit weaker or that you don't usually pay attention to, and what happens when you overpower one of those ways of knowing. Okay, so I would propose roughly 10 minutes. Maybe we can do a breakout room with one person per breakout room so that you can really write down and reflect about it. So Zikri, can I ask you to do breakout rooms, one person per room, just for you to do this reflection, and then we come back?
Okay, sir. Give me a second.
Right, and in the meantime, if you want to already start reflecting and maybe start writing down, we'll cut down the time of the breakout room.
Okay, I'm ready. For how many minutes, sir?
Let's make it 8 minutes, since I assume that most people are already doing the activity.
Okay, 8 minutes.
Can everyone still see the screen that I have?
No, it's not visible currently.
Not yet, sir.
Let me just stop sharing, and then I'll come back. Can you see it now?
Yes, it's visible
Yes,
now.
sir.
Okay, great. So if you have already started considering that there are multiple ways of engaging with the world, even though we always bring it back to a cognitive level and we reflect critically, or sometimes not so much, right? What happens is that in peace research, and I'm happy to introduce to you my thesis supervisor here, this guy next to me called Norbert. He started thinking of peace studies and about the multiple ways that we can inquire, we get to know about peace. So basically, based on Jung, he starts discussing that there is a way of knowing through the body, so the somatic knowing through sensing, yeah? And there is an empathic and effective way of learning through the heart and through feelings. We also always process things intellectually with our mind and our thinking. But we can go beyond that, and we can use the intuition of the soul. And this is something that he takes from Jung. I know that if we go beyond body, heart, and mind, it already starts becoming a little bit challenging. And we saw in the earlier session where we were still finding that maybe the psychology developed in the West, it's not suitable to other cultural contexts, but we might start talking about spirituality in a way, and then spirit. I think it doesn't really, I don't think that it's important to differentiate those, because the point here would be really focusing on how we can engage with the world differently. And I just put this note in here of being aware of imbalances because whenever we are engaging of the world with our body and moving, sometimes when it's under considered, we have the sense of lethargy, of being unable to respond adequately. And in situations of direct violence, it is important that we're able to respond not with violence, but in self-defense, really. So we gotta be attuned to our body and how our body communicates things as well. So whenever we have our process of somatic knowing overpowered, usually we are communicating with our body more than we should. And so it's important that we know the adequacy of body language in certain settings, right? And likewise, when we have not developed our capabilities of being empathic and effective, what happens is that we become insensitive and numb to others. And if that is overpowered, we tend to become overly dramatic. And that takes away focus of interacting with other people. And of course, if you overpower your intellectual knowing, you become quite self-righteous. And then you assume that you have thought things thoroughly and then you know better. And this is detrimental to relationships. And if you don't exercise your intellect, if you don't cultivate your intellect enough, you might as well just become plainly illogical, which is, again, also very detrimental to any relationship. So there are these different ways of knowing, and it's important that we exercise them and be balanced in all of them. But basically, this is this research legitimizes that I talk about empathic and affective knowing, which is the heart and love. The heart as a metaphor for love. Okay, so I think I've done this traveling, which was a large traveling from international relations to peace studies, and then through this framework in order to talk about love. And of course, the heart is a metaphor for love in several cultural traditions. And the most recent research in neurobiology will say that no, compassion, affection, it has nothing to do with our hearts, this organ, but with our minds, with our brains, because the brain processes whatever is going on and generates a response on the bodily level that will trigger the heart to either pump more blood and beat faster or not. Still, we don't have to think of biology. We don't have to ground our research in biology to talk about phenomena that we know that happens and exist. So we have here the Hindu tradition, the Anahata Chakra, which is what corresponds to the heart, and the Chinese characters for love above, which is I, and then below the character for heart, which is Shin. Yeah. So we know that in many traditions, we realize love and we associate with the heart without necessarily having a correspondence to biology. But what really is love? Before we enter this discussion in the basically the cultural context that I can explain and share with you, now I would like to do a more lively breakout room discussion. I would like to pair you with groups of maybe four or five, and allow you to discuss what is the meaning of love to you personally. And then once we get back to the big group, I would like to ask you to share something that you might have learned different. But for this activity, I would like to propose that you talk about the meaning of love for you personally. We're going to talk about the meaning of love in your cultural context a little bit later. Yeah? So Zikri, whenever you're ready, we can do a breakout session of possibly 7 minutes, I would say, with 4 to 5 participants.
Okay, sir, on it.
And I'm going to do a print screen and share it in the WhatsApp group.
Okay, I'm ready. 7 minutes, right? Okay. Open. Okay.
Okay, great. Someone was faster and shared the picture in the WhatsApp
Zikri, can
group.
you turn off the recording?
Okay, okay, okay.
You are mute.
Okay, yeah, thank you for the tip. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you had time enough. I hope 7 minutes was time enough for you to discuss what is your personal understanding of love. Would you be kind to share maybe something, not your own perspective, but something that one of your colleagues shared that you'd like to bring to our attention here in the group?
Yeah, may I?
Please
We
do.
had
Yeah.
we had a very interesting session, and I would start with John, because when we asked John to define what love means to him, he was like, "The pandemic has given me so much anxiety that I don't know how to define it." So he did not define it at all. But when I asked Anna, she said that it's a human capability to sense things that we usually ignore. And Abdullah said it's a deep feeling that we have for someone or something particular. It's something unavoidable. And Manoj said it's an eternal part of one's soul. It can make one happy or sad. It depends on the situation. And I personally think that love is not just a feeling. It's about acceptance and freedom, wherein you let the other person evolve, flourish, grow, wherein there are no constraints. Yeah, thank you so much.
Fantastic. Another group?
Yeah, so I'm Nikita. Can you hear me?
Hi, Nikita.
Yes.
We can hear you. Yes.
Okay, great. So my group, we spoke to love as being unconditional. It supports, it does not, it is a unifying force and source. It does not seek to destroy or hurt. We reference a few tangibles or intangibles where we said our family represents love, or our mother's warmth. And love also, those unconditional qualities will be, it's compassionate, it gives, it's empathetic. And I think that was our group. Yeah, thank you.
Great. Another group?
Okay. For our group, we have Toshi, and we have Isa, we have Sarah also. So, okay, so I'll share on behalf of them. Sarah and Toshi kind of have similarity in in the perspective of the love. They said that being loved means being confident, you know, where you can feel confident, where you can have a comfortable zone, and where you can feel, you can be safe as much as possible. Like you can, just like us being safe in this group, it's like love. And according to Inas, she said that love is also like, it's a passionate affection, and love is where you can be yourself without judging. And you know, she is married, so, and she has a supportive husband. That means they are growing, you know, they are growing with each other in a progressive way. And love is like feeling good, feeling good and feeling wonderful in whatever you do, you know. And for me, I feel like love is to care about for your people, to care about your near ones, and you like to protect them, you know, from any kind and any sort of danger. Or even you have that tendency to feel, to have to kind of have feeling to sacrifice for them, even if there is something gone wrong, or you know, it's like, so it's like for, so our group has come up like love is like confident, comfortable, where you can be comfortable as much as you can, where there should be a safe space, and there should be a passionate affection, and you know, growing with one another in a progressive way. That's it. So we come up like that.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Naran.
You're welcome.
Do we have another group? Maybe one last group would like to comment? No? Okay.
May
So, please.
Sir, we have 4 members in our groups. Sir, mostly we have explained that love is not something that we can express. Love is about the caring, supporting. That when you are have a person in your life, maybe it's the family member, maybe your friends, you have take caring and support from them. That is called love, and it is biological factors, as Abdullah said that it's a biological factor. We cannot express it that I have too much love for you. We cannot explain the love as properly.
Great.
Yes.
I see also Debola and Christina with their hands raised. Debola?
Yes, thank you. In my group, we try to see what love is all about. But personally, on my own, I said, love can be seen as a passionate compassion of affections for oneself and for others, including your larger environment. I stand to disagree that love is not biological, but it has a cultural element where you grow, you get to love, and you get to love to be loved by others. It is a compromise. It is a win-win of a thing, because to love, you have to compromise. Because to love, you have to give away. And to love, you must be tolerant. You must be able to, accept others and accept yourself. So, to me, it is more of a passionate thing. It is more of a compassion. It is more of, showing affections not only to yourself. And you don't think of love only from your realm. You should think about, love from others as well, and how this can be fraternized in a way that it becomes a modicum of what you can share and where we can live. Essentially, with love, there will be peace. That is what I said.
Thank you, Debola. Christina?
Yes, hi, good evening, Edigio. Yes, in my group, we discussed the same thing as it was discussed before, but I actually started the group by saying that Plato wrote about what love was, and I recommended everyone to read the synopsis of Plato, where he talks about the birth of Aphrodite, or Venus, you might call her. I call her Aphrodite, it's a nicer name in Greek. And it's a nice way to explain. I think he explains it in a very logical way what love is, and is that side of being the poor and the poor side and the rich side of love. And anyway, we're not going to go into it because it's a little bit philosophical, but I would like everybody else just to browse it through. I think it's very interesting.
Yeah. Great, thank you, Christina. Do we have another hand raised by user? So please go ahead and unmute yourself.
I'm Afifa. I personally see love when I was away, separated from my family during the first outbreak of the COVID-19. I was in Malaysia for giving birth my baby, and suddenly have this outbreak. And I was separated with my family in Saudi, my husband and 2 kids in Saudi, and I with new baby and other kids in Malaysia. That intense time making me realize more about love in not being far away, and the things that make something that about love that is absent. The absence of this thing like adaptive analysis make me realize many things that I not realized before. It was for 8 months.
Thank you, Afifa.
Yeah, thank you.
So this idea of love as longing for connection, right? Do we have any other comments, or would someone else like to comment as well? Or we can always come back to it. I'd like to just make a bridge to what Christina has mentioned, because I mean, you have all presented very valid reasons for understanding what love is. And I think in one way or another, those are meaningful expressions of love. And just by using Christina's comment as a bridge, if we start contextualizing this concept, this idea of love, where I currently live, and we go back to Greece, which stands usually as the reference to whatever is Europe or the West. Yes, there is somewhat a biological dimension of love if we understand it as sexual attraction, this longing to be connected and in relationship with other people, that in Greece would refer to eros. Yeah. At the same time, it's important that we know that it is also an expression of love whenever we care for other people and we form this deep bond of friendship that doesn't involve sexual attraction. So this idea of siblinghood, brotherhood, sisterhood, this is also a form of love according to the Greeks, in the form of philia. Also, we have storge, which would mean the love, the unconditional, basically the unconditional love that parents have for raising a child. We want to see this human being thrive in this world, right? So that is a form of deeply caring for what we have created, and we nurture it. And agape would be the unconditional love that some of you have mentioned, that, you know, surpasses selfishness and puts others before your own self. That would be unconditional. You don't let anything stand in between the desire for the growth and the happiness of the other. And also there's another concept of love that is based on pragma, which comes from realizing the responsibility that you have towards the realization of happiness of other people. And pragma usually is the more grounded understanding of love and of respect that you get with time. It's a more mature form of love. And also we have philautia, which is an important concept as well, which is grounded on the idea of self-love and of self-respect, of not pushing oneself too hard and not causing damage to oneself. It's important that we have those concepts also in mind. But let's not forget that there's also another concept of love in ancient Greece, that is xenia, which means hospitality, being open to other people and those who we might not be familiar with. Last but not least, this doesn't have a reference in Greek. It already comes from Latinized context, past Greece, which is ludus. And to love something is also to be able to enjoy it and to have this playfulness, this joy that doesn't require us to be so strict and serious all of the time. Yeah, so these are a few concepts of love in the context of ancient Greece. And then what I'd like to do is a progression of how these concepts have evolved in the context of Europe with critical lenses. Yeah. So if we shift from the Greek context towards the, let's say, the realm of Christianhood, we see that through this theologian from Sweden, Nygren, he tries to discuss what's the meaning of love in Christianity. And he talks about eros not in a sexual way, but understanding eros as an ecstasy relating to realizing the perfection of God. So love for Nygren and would be an upward, a form of love that celebrates God. In the meantime, there would also be agape, which would mean the compassion that we have for other people. But what Nygren tries to do in his text is actually talk about Christianity more in line of agape, because what happens is that the most traditional interpretation of love in the Catholic Church has been the one that is propelled by St. Augustine in his gospel, which is this erotic kind of love that is ecstatic and wants to celebrate God, and actually starts not paying so much attention to siblinghood, but also to others. And Nygren is trying to retrieve this understanding of agape in Christianhood that we don't see much with St. Augustine. And I think one great example of a gospel that really talks about love as agape is the Gospel of St. Francis of Assisi, which is really a beautiful one. When he talks about communionship with all things in nature, and he proposes to lead a life at service of other people, that is the epitome or the embodiment of agapean love. Okay? And if we move a little bit further in time, there is a very particular understanding of love that appears in Europe in the late Middle Ages within the region of the Languedoc, which is basically between the north of Italy, south of France, and north of Spain. And this basically are the forerunners of Romanticism. And it's the troubadours is a movement that appears that basically talks about love as this deep love and appraisal of whoever we are in love with. That is infatuation and what some people would call catexis, which is being entranced and dominated by the desire to love someone else, which, since it's unachievable, it creates desire, melancholy, and suffering. But the interesting thing about this is that, well, nobody could understand where this came from in the context of Europe, but it turns out that the actual origins is that most historians tend to forget that Europe was not the site for Christianity only. And actually, this idea of love and appraisal for the ideal object comes, actually the name troubadour comes from the Provençal word trobar, that in turn derives from Arabic taraba. Yeah, and it was influenced by the Muslim cultures that we had in the Iberian Peninsula, what is currently Spain and Portugal, which were lyric pieces that would celebrate our affection of love, which was very common then. So it's interesting that people could not explain where this troubadourian love came from in Europe, because in their weaving of history, they tend to whitenize it and refer to Europe as only Christian, when in fact Europe had a lot of Muslim influence. So it's important that we have that in mind. Yeah. And if we progress in time as well, we see that past the Middle Ages, during the period of the Renaissance and Neoclassicism, when the Catholic Church loses power, we see that there is a return to the classic Greek ideal of celebrating humanness and the human body in the arts and expression in its sexuality. As you can see in the Venus here of Botticelli, we see the human body and it's a celebration of it. So we bring back the dimension of the human body within Eros. It's no longer an Eros that is just a celebration of God in St. Augustine, but a celebration of Eros and its sexuality, right? But the problem again remains, because if you remember from yesterday's course, there's an understanding of the human as humanitas only and not anthropos. And this means that, this means that they only understood beauty and love and the celebration of the human with and for white people. And of course, agape, how does agape relate to colonization and enslavement? It doesn't. So this concept of love that is being retrieved within the Renaissance and Neoclassicism has no match in reality, which is terribly unfortunate. And as we proceed with time, what we see is that with the Enlightenment and the Industrial Revolution, which we can consider as markers of the process of modernity that happened in Europe, we see that, as I mentioned before, it has placed central value on our minds. And basically, we realize that only through scientific knowledge and cognition and mind, we get to know the world properly. And basically, because that is not true, the Romantics have strongly responded to that, placing perhaps too much emphasis on one's individual subjectivity. If the troubadourians were about writing love letters and love songs to our idealized lover that we could not reach out, the Romantics will also focus too much on one's feelings about the loved ones. And can I ask someone to read these two quotations by Gorodeisky?
Shall I?
Maybe, yes, please.
Okay. This rational but non-cognitive nature of feeling in general and of aesthetic feeling in particular is perhaps the central feature that renders aesthetic feeling an attractive ingredient that occupied the Romantics. Art and aesthetics also provided a model for the Romantic political ideal, a democratic, egalitarian community grounded in the Republican values of liberty, equality, and fraternity.
Okay, great. So what is happening in here is that being encapsulated or locked in one's own subjectivity leads people to project things. And so in the basically social context in which the French Revolution takes place and people are thinking about liberty, equality, and fraternity, people start projecting their own nationalist views because they want to celebrate their own selves and their understanding of their own subjectivity. And as we know, the French Revolution basically paves the way for bourgeoisie and nationalism. And what does that mean in the end? Is that we see the appearance of a new class with their own interests at stake, and the idea of love is not quite a endearing one. If we go to the romantic novels of Jane Austen, what we see is a very bourgeois concern with celebrating marriage and making sure that you get married to those people who actually have enough money for your own happiness, and makes love a commodity, right? So we can exchange love like that. But what happens is that the amount of poverty and suffering that we had at the time basically has allowed Stone to make the point that there are levels of human misery at which the intensity of the struggle to satisfy the basic need for food and shelter leaves little room for humane emotions and affective relationship. So not only love is commodified and becomes bourgeois, it's something that struggling people are not even able to think about because they have to think first and foremost about survival, and that becomes a challenge. Not to mention that in the 17th and 19th centuries, Europe was politically concerned with the establishment of their own empire. So again, where is that where are those understandings of love that we have, that we maintain in Christianity and that we have in the Greek ideal? So history starts giving evidence that the concept of love is not subsisting into the European development, right? But if we fast forward to the last century, what we see not so much in Europe any longer, but in the post-war in the West, is basically a resistance to the standardization of emotional life. Basically, the understanding of love is broadened to the point that, okay, are we able to feel love for each other? Yes, but why does it have to be related to only people of the opposite sex? So perhaps the greatest development of an idea of love in the last century, or maybe even the recuperation of an idea of love past the history of Europe between, let's say, the 1600 and until the 1900, is the realization that yes, we can love more than we have been told that we can, towards alternatives and more meaningful ways of relating to other people that in the end remain true to human diversity. Okay? And if we can now, let's go to another breakout room discussion and now to discuss the meaning of love in your own culture. Maybe also consider if the meaning of love has changed over time in your culture, and how can you devise this process? And then we come back again to discuss in the big group. Okay?
Did you? I'm just wondering, would it be okay to take a break now because usually we take a break around an hour and a half after the session.
Okay.
What do you think? Is that okay with you?
That is perfect. Yeah.
And we take a like a 15-minute break, and then you can come back to the breakout room. Is that okay?
Fantastic.
And the participants, are you all okay with that?
Yes, Professor.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so
Yes,
you
fine
can
for me.
you can take a bit of a break, and I can also give me an opportunity to go back to my to my sort of period of growing up, which is make love, not war.
Yes.
Being an old hippie.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm sorry I forgot you to mention the hippie movement was all about breaking away with the violence of war and promoting the idea of love. I try to do that with the picture of the 70s.
Okay. That's wonderful. Okay, thank you. We'll take a 15-minute break and then we'll get back. Zikri?
आके आपको बताता हूँ, मुझे खुद भी इसका अंदाजा नहीं है, तो मैं पता करवा के तो फिर आपको बताऊंगा। असल में ये मेरे ख्याल से ये जाना है उधर, ये
So, welcome back, everyone. Maybe we could give 2 more minutes of waiting before we will resume our activities. Since I see that most cameras are still off. Okay, we have some people that are already returning. Great. Okay, so in the meantime, as we wait for everybody to return, Zikri, I would propose that for this activity that we create, again, breakout rooms of roughly 4 to 5 people, maybe 4 each group. Yeah, breakout rooms of 4. And you can already plan, but don't start it just yet so that I can just go back to explain the activity.
Okay. Group of 4 people ya?
Yes.
Ya, Zikri 4 orang ya satu grup. Thank you.
Okay, everyone. So I hope everybody is back. So the activity that I would propose us to do right now is try to think a little bit about the meaning of love in your culture. If this meaning has changed over time, if it has more than one meaning, how do these different meanings actually interact or clash? And then afterwards, we bring the discussion to to the big group. Yeah, and for this activity, I would propose maybe, because it might take a little bit of time also for you to reflect on the meaning of your culture, maybe do some research since you're in front of the computers anyway. Let's say 10 minutes for you to do this quick research and share with your partners. Yeah, well, hopefully it was the activity was clear. Maybe we can already start with the breakout rooms and do our 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay, sir.
Okay, welcome back, everyone.
Thank you, Professor.
I will share my screen again for you. There you go. And shall we start sharing? I think that maybe this activity deserves a little bit more time, and maybe you want to just share your cultural context. If there's an understanding of love that is, let's say, more prominent, and if this concept has changed over time. Let's have an open microphone session right now.
I would share
maybe
from our group.
Great.
That's okay?
Okay. Yes.
Right. So there were me, Alia, Ayat, and Nikita. So it was interesting to hear from Arabic culture, Caribbean, mixed Indonesian, Malaysian, about the meaning of love in our cultures. So one thing that I found it in common is that, let's say in the generations nowadays, the way society express love has changed over time. So long ago, people might think or interpret love as something that very private, only within the family, let's say, also for a couple. But then nowadays, in the era of social media, people kind of have the platform to share or to even normalize to bring love in public in a certain way. However, we also having this challenge whether or not the love that is put it on the social media portrays is actually the true meanings of love, or just kind of like having this social media pressure to put the label, to put the images, but we couldn't really sure whether or not that what it is portray or picture in the social media is what the nowadays love is really means. That's what we had in our group. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. And I think you have touched a very important topic in here. The way that love is treated in popular culture nowadays is extremely problematic, because this assumption of the romantic loved ones and how it's basically still tapping on the commodification of love as something that you use to gain benefits by virtue of marrying someone else, and this assumption that we're marrying because we want to be with someone, and it turns out that it's not quite true. So thank you for touching on that dimension. Any other group?
Yeah, so in my room I had Toshi and Nidhi. Nidhi and I are from like South Asia. She's from northern India and I'm from Indian occupied Kashmir. So basically, I think it's something that Toshi should share, because he was shocked when I told him that in India or in South Asia, when we are close to each other, we don't, we don't adhere to these formal codes of conduct. It's like if my friend is doing something for me, I'll not say thanks to him or her, because I consider him my friend. We are a family, so we don't say, okay, thank you, you're welcome. This formality is not there. It's very open. If you do something for me, I know you're a family to me. I don't have to thank you for that. So we have that level of comfort. Our love is, devoid of these formal constructs. I was moved when Toshi said that the concept of love in his culture is deeply influenced by Brahmanism, right? Buddhism. So yeah, it's great to see how religions influence the concept of love in particular cultures, and it's very inspiring because Buddhism is known to be the religion of peace, harmony, brotherhood. It's deeply practiced in parts of Ladakh. So yeah, it was something very moving. And Nidhi and I, we also shared how in Punjabi and Kashmiri culture, love is expressed through dances, be it the Punjabi Bhangra, which is done like this, or the Kashmiri Roof, in which women form lines and they walk while singing the folklore. And food is also, food and festivity is something that cannot be taken out of Kashmiri and Punjabi culture. So yeah, these were the similarities that were there in Nidhi's and my culture. And obviously, Toshi also added few insights since he's from Japan, and he shared his perspective. So yeah, it was an enriching talk, I must say.
Great. So it's interesting that the first group mentioned about love being something that in general dedicated to the family, and that Rafael, you commented about how within relations of intimacy enough, you avoid those formal forms of being courteous because there is a level of trust and intimacy enough to have mutual understanding, right? So these are actually very important understandings that then we will bring back to the discussion. But thank you for presenting this too. Another group?
Can I speak?
Yes, please, Saddam, right?
Yes. We have the 4 members in the group from Saudi Arabia and India and Pakistan. We both, the Dilawar Khan and me from Pakistan, Manoj from India, and Lina Hakiki from Saudi. So the first thing is that mostly we have discussed that the
I'm from Lebanon, Saddam, not Saudi.
Okay.
Lebanon. Okay, but it's Arabic also. Sorry.
Sorry. Arabic language. Yeah, okay. Thank you. So we have the first discussed that what is the meaning of love in their own language. So in Arabic, it's hub. Yani they say that Habibi, as mostly we hear in some song that Ya Habibi, Ya Habibi. And in Urdu, and mostly it's called Muhabbat and Pyar. But the here in the context of love has been changed. In Pakistan, mostly in the Pashtun family, here in Pakistan, we cannot express our love for our sister from our mothers, and we cannot discuss it openly with them that how much I love you. It's considered not as a good thing. The second thing we have discussed that mostly the terminology of love has been nowadays changed. As one of the participants discussed that mostly we, if we want to show that how much I love you, we said that through the social media we connect with each other. That send me your pictures. We have a video call. So through this way we can express our feeling of love. So that's we have discussed. Thank you.
Great. So then may I ask you a question? Why is it that you consider that affection towards mothers and sisters is not very good to demonstrate?
Because of our culture in Pashtun here in Pakistan, we cannot express it properly. If you say that I love my sisters, so it's not considered a good thing here in Pashtun family mostly. Pashtun and
it can be misinterpreted. Is that what you mean?
It means that we have a respect. If you have a respect, you have a love for your family, but you have not allowed to show that, because mostly in Pashtuns and Baloch family, they are a joint family system. So if you express your feeling for your love, or for your sister, for your mother, and you cannot treat the other cousins and the cousin sisters properly, so it's the way of they consider is the discrimination with your cousins. So that's why we cannot express it properly, that how much I love. We have equally to say that I love you all, but that is the things that you cannot express it with your own family members as your mother and sisters.
Well, very interesting to think about how you express affection and relationship towards others, and depending on whoever is interacting with you at that moment, that actually means an unobservation of whoever is there, so it can create imbalances. Very interesting. Thank you so much, Saddam.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
If may I add in Saddam Hussein's point, because I am from Pakistan too, I think. He wants to say that our gesture shows that I love my father, or I love my mother, or I love my brother. It is in our gestures. But we cannot openly say that, Dad, I love you, or Dad, or Mom, I love you, because they know. We think they know, and our gestures tell us that we love, and we love them. So we are to preferably say in our gestures, in our doing, in our respect, instead saying that sentence towards them. I think what he wants to say that.
I see. Thank you. That was Tuba, right? Or
Yes.
Manoj?
Tuba.
Okay, I'm hearing a little bit of interference. So I'll ask you to mute. Okay, sorry, Manoj, I muted you because there was a lot of interference. So I hope that that is okay. I actually also did not quite understood you. So maybe we can go back to that afterwards. It's okay, maybe we can go to another group.
Okay, may I speak from our group?
Fantastic, Nauram.
Okay, so it's Nauram, my surname is Rosie.
Okay, Roji.
Thank you. So we discussed what's the meaning of love, like love in the sense of love, like relationship love. I mean, like, you know, you choose your partner and all for the marriage and all. So we discussed about it from the different culture. We have Anne from Vietnam. We have Ranita from Indonesia. So we have kind of defined this relationship in terms of our culture. So Anne said that she's not very fond of the love things happening in their country because it's very toxic. She says that because people are not allowed to choose their partner. You know, they don't have the liberty to choose their partner. It's the parents to choose for them. And
I mean, it's not that. It's just what I said is the way people choose a partner to express love.
Okay.
Yes, is not totally freedom. They will always come with judgment and responsibility.
Okay. And from Ranita from the Indonesia says that love expresses by the parents to their children right from the childhood, and after marriage also parents take care of their children by protecting them, and it shows love to them. And because of this strictness, strict behavior and strict guidance, that's kind of showing love to them. And as part of my culture, if I have to say, India is a very diverse country. So we have there's various religions like Buddhism, Hinduism, Muslims, and I'm from Sanamahism, which is not quite popular because I belong in a small community called Meitei. So this in Hinduism, basically, there is hierarchical class based, and they often get married to their same class, same caste and class also. So, but in my community, we have the liberty to choose our partners. We have that that kind of freedom. We have got that utmost kind of freedom to choose our partner, because all every generation I have witnessed, since from my grandpa and all, they have been in love marriage only, and that's for that it's very I can say a positive attitude towards love, and also Anne was putting out this patriarchal notion about love where male mainly dominates over women in in deciding the decision of their family and all. So this is it. We all discussed about this thing. Thank you.
Thank you for your perspective, Roji. And thank you, Tabby, for your chipping in. Yes, I think that, again, the idea of how we relate to people and who we get to relate is important to be reconsidered, right? Because sometimes society imposes these blockages that don't allow us to actually lead, to put in a way, an open way of interacting with other people, right? And it's important to bear that in mind. Adebola has got his hand raised.
Yes, thank you, Prof. I wasn't in any room. I was alone, but this is my personal contributions. From Africa, love is induced by the natures of our extended family. In Africa, we were born into an extended family, and love is fostered in the process of growing up. We were made to love our people in the community, because even while we are growing, we are not brought up by only your parents, you are brought up by entire community. That was traditional love, if I should say that. But the advent of fraternity with the external world has hindered the growth of this family love, family union. For example, many of us, we have left the community for a while. We now have a kind of cosmopolitan love, a love of where we are, where we live. I am in Nigeria. I live in the Gambia now. The love of now is cosmopolitan because I got to love myself where I am. I got to love my neighbor where I am, and I got to love the environment where I am. Back at home, the love continued to decline, the traditional love of the family, of the community. I mean, your traditional community continue to decline because we are being separated. Sociological liberalism has promoted a kind of a global acculturation whereby you don't grow, or we are no longer within the ambit of our immediate environment. We are now in a global culture. And as a result of that global culture, we are made to love in that environment where we find our love. So the transformation is from traditional love, which is within the realms of your immediate environment where you were born and where you grew. But the contemporary love, or the new form of love, is cosmopolitan, because for example, I am in a place where I am is not where I grew up or where I was born, but I have to love myself here, love my neighbor, love my environment, even love the country where I am, because the peace of the country is my peace. This is my submission.
Thank you so much for enthusiastic sharing, Adebola. I think that if you want to look back to Sorokin, the guy that I used the quotation to open the intervention, he talks about the dimensions of love as expensive, right, in terms of oneself, society, etc., but also in terms of death. But what I would like to highlight is this concept of love that is beyond familyhood and starts actually broadening itself towards community, right? And Adebola points to a level of cosmopolitanism. I would not forget perhaps to mention that in the Western context of hyper-individualism, I think this idea of collective love is very frail, very weak, and maybe it's important that we bring it back. I'm going to try to address it further ahead in the presentation. Yeah. Shall we have another group? I think I saw another hand raised a while ago. I don't remember who it was. I think it was Nikita, maybe.
It was a question, but I think I will hold it until the end of your presentation.
Okay, sure.
Thank
As
you.
you
Thank you.
any other group? Yep. If not, maybe Nikita, you want to do your question now?
Hello.
Okay. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I think Abdullahi.
Yeah, Abdullah. Yeah, my group were from Indonesia, Germany, Pakistan, and Somalia. Now my name is Abdullah. I am from Somalia. So the group mentioned the like different cultures, yeah, believe in love. So in the case of Somalia, if I talk first Somalia, the meaning of love is ja'al, yeah, I see from the screen also. So mostly in Somalia, the people, you know, they have the old tradition. So maybe the old families, they do not even, everything about the love is hidden. Yeah, no one mentioned. So even, you know, if you see some of the, you know, population, they cannot mention even to the wife and husband. So we do the same because it's traditional, sometimes it's religious, I don't know, but it's not religious sometimes. But you can mention, yeah, if you have a love to, you know, to your children, to your wife or husband, but it's like old tradition. But nowadays, like young generations, you know, they have a good relationship, they make love. So even they get from, you know, from the social media, from the, you know, film, everything. So everything was polarized. Other friends, they mentioned that it's like still like some, you know, some changes. Yeah, it's not like a tradition. No? So the population or the people that those have close relationship, still they are doing some changes. As in Germany, also there is a good relationship between the friends, maybe boyfriend, girlfriend. There is a close relationship. Even the love is in the family, is something that can be seen or can be not, that's something that cannot be hidden. Yeah, but I think it's based on some, you know, the context, the religion, you know, like some of the people try. I think the main point where in my conclusion, the main point is like also depends on the beast. Yeah, for example, if the place that you live is not a good environment, you know, the peace is not so stable, maybe it affects, yeah, the love, the people in between, or the families, everything. But if there is a good peace, yeah, something maybe it will be changed. Yeah, so that is my suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you, Abdullah. Indeed, I think that love is a fragile thing that is affected by cultural components, and we have to be aware of how that actually affects changes in the way that we understand the concept. Do we have any other group left? No, right? I think I counted right. Maybe I'm mistaken. If I'm mistaken, just please let me know and we can carry on with the discussion. But if not, now what I would like to do is very briefly, actually, we still have roughly 35 minutes of session, and I'd like to briefly discuss some references to the idea of love within academia. And I would like to start with German philosopher Erich Fromm. He wrote this book also in 56. called The Art of Loving. And what he does is he tries to understand the phenomenon of love, and he talks about motherly love, which is this unconditional love that wants to raise child, which is the storge from the Greeks that we have seen. But also a kind of fatherly love that wants to see people thrive. And it's a kind of love that needs to be conquered, because we have to allow people to be proud of ourselves and what we do in life. So that would be the expression of fatherly love. Brotherly love or siblinghood love would be this deep affection, compassion that we have for each other. And that would be agape, again, in the Greek tradition. But also self-love in the sense of being respectful of oneself. And it's really important that we don't confuse the idea of self-love with egocentrism and over-focusing on oneself. But self-love is about the mere preservation and care that we take towards ourselves. And if this care usually comes at the expense of love for others, then that might be a little bit problematic, because love is not something that, according to Eric Fromm, that you give either to oneself or to others, but it's mutually nurturing. Yeah. And then, of course, the love of God, and basically the realization of, I mean, we live and we love, and this is something that we should be able to really cherish. Yeah. But love, for Erich Fromm, is an art. It requires our discipline, our concentration, patience. So it requires us to exercise, to practice love. We have to perfect our capability of providing unconditional love, even if we're not mothers. Okay, we can all exercise the ability of being unconditional and loving other people. We can also just in our relationships really share with other people what would make us proud in their own lives, right? And taking care of self, and realizing spirituality and this God is in everything, right? So these are the ideas that Erich Fromm is trying to address. And basically, he talks about the faith to go ahead and exercise the art of loving and overcoming narcissism, which requires a lot of courage. But it's only through this that we can actually tell people that we are practicing an idea or an art of love. Yeah. And not in Germany any longer, where Erich Fromm is from, but in Austria, Martin Buber has written this Iron Door text, which is really seminal. And he talks about this relationship towards other people and how this relationship manifests almost in a sacred manner. When we're talking about the idea of a love of God or an erotic love that manifests in ecstasies, his philosophy is trying to talk precisely about that the encounter that we have with other people and the interaction that we have with them should always be sacred. Hence, an idea of love as a form of respect and reverence to other people. In the meantime, Levinas, he's between France and Finland. He talks about, in his book Totality and Infinity, the idea that we really dissolve ourselves in the relationship with others, because if we're open enough to interact with others and learn from each other, then our own previous notions of self, they disappear. So we merge into infinity, into these multiple interactions that we have. But these intellectuals are thinking within the context of Europe. And a good question for us to bear in mind is there something as authority, or is there an actual separation of who we are as individual beings and others and our community? I think that other cultural contexts might actually offer a perspective that no, there's no separation, and this is an illusion of our mind, that we are just one being And this is important that we bear in mind, yeah, to compare cultural contexts. And I think that also the philosophy of Gianni Vattimo is quite important, because in the context of Europe and past colonization, etc., what he proposes is the idea of weak thought. But weak is not that it's unable to do anything because it's too weak, but an idea of weakness as opposition to strong, and a strong metaphysics and a strong point of view that imposes on others. Weak, basically in this quotation, is an attitude towards things, ideas, relationships that is basically about openness to learn, to listen to the world and to others, who we are always in a relationship with. So you see, if we're always in a relationship with others, and we displace this idea there are two people interacting, but it's the interaction, we dissolve this idea of selfhood, but really stresses the possibility of being open to others, right? So if with these two philosophers, we start talking about the encounter with others. And then with Vattimo, we're talking about taking a step further and in the encounter, being able to learn from others. And then we shift a little bit from philosophy to humanistic psychology, because with Abraham Maslow, the one in the left, what we see is that love is not something that we have to discover, that we have to find, but it's always present in ourselves. It's always a potential that we can tap into. We don't have to find love. And of course, in our life, we do need love. We need to feel this recognition, respect, and feeling of belonging in order to be able to fully blossom as someone in a society that is concerned with the well-being of others, right? And perhaps the greatest influence in my own research was from Carl Rogers with his client-centered approach. He was a psychologist, but instead of seeing patients as people that did not have the tools to heal themselves or to take care of themselves, they just saw people as clients, people that were asking for support. So what Rogers does in this client-centered approach is to realize that people always had, they were never taken away their own capabilities of learn and grow, right? They always had power all along. It's not about giving power to people, but realize that these people have power. It's just that they might not have realized it, and I will accompany them and with them try to, support this process of unlocking our inner power. And I think that this is where my understanding of empathy comes from, which I definitely draw from Rogers. And perhaps I'll read it myself. So his definition of empathy is entering the private perceptual world of the other, being sensitive moment by moment to the changing felt meanings. So by changing felt meanings is the variation and the change of feelings and the meanings that this person is experiencing. And this should be done without making judgments. Basically, sensing also meanings that the person might not be aware of. But the point is not about trying to enter the private perceptual world of the other and being attentive and sensitive to the variation of feelings and meanings that this person is giving, and then telling them what they are not seeing. It definitely includes communicating what you might be perceiving in a respectful manner and being aware of what might trigger people in the wrong way. So checking in with and checking if you're understanding whatever they're experiencing correctly or not, and being guided by the responses that you're getting. This is an art of retaining relationship and keeping interacting with other people. That basically is the expression of empathy, providing an account of how we are dealing with others. Yeah. And if we break from philosophy and psychology, going back to Adebola's comment about love in terms of a community and growing in a conception of love, I think that the expression of love in the work of Paulo Freire and some other authors that I'll highlight ahead is basically about collective good, an understanding of politics that we do whatever we can in order to promote the collective good and the collective happiness. So it's a matter of responsibility and of compassion. So Freire is influenced by Marx, and he is really concerned with basically allowing people to be critical about what is it that they need for their own process of liberation from oppression. And he does this in his process of educating, alphabetizing adults. And he does it not by telling people how to read or write, but working with people for them to learn and read and write by themselves by being critical of their surroundings. So he worked with people that came from very poor backgrounds that used to work in construction and barely had means. So what he did was start inquiring, what is it that you use? What is this tool that you use to work? And then he would break down the word in syllables and ask, do you have, let's say, if you're a builder and you build a house, what are the tools that you need? And then he would write down the tools that this person would talk, and then break down the word and explain. And through this process of alphabetizing, he would actually develop people's critical minds for them to use it politically and to end oppression. So really, this is how one goes out of their own egocentrism and puts their work to the alleviation of human oppression and suffering. Yeah, but not only that, I think that both Bell Hooks and Gloria Anzaldúa were very influenced by Paulo Freire. I mean, we have Tabby and Alex that have done a course with me, with Jenny Jung and Jenny Murphy before, so they might have seen this already. Also Nikita, but basically, especially Bell Hooks is identifying the problems of a capitalist, sexist, white supremacist influence within the West, which is producing mass suffering. And basically, Hooks realized that love is the will to extend oneself for the purpose of nurturing one's own, but especially another's growth. So love is about addressing capitalism, sexism, and white supremacism in the shape of racism for the sake of collective good. Because if we really shift from this idea of there is another that suffers and we realize that we are all interconnected, shifting from the idea of Buber and Levinas, others people's suffering is my own suffering, and therefore I must. And if there are so many political groups manifesting against capitalism, sexism, and racism, then that is my own responsibility to be able to address it. And I think that Anzaldúa does it beautifully as well, based on this idea of clashing identities and as if we are fundamentally different. Yeah. There's this quotation that I might read myself for the sake of time that goes, because I am mestiza, which means mixed, continually walk out of one culture and into another, because I am in all cultures at the same time. Alma entre dos mundos. 3, 4. Me zumba la cabeza con lo contradictorio. Estoy norteada por todas las voces que me hablan simultáneamente. So basically, she says how she's a soul between 2, 3, 4 worlds, and how that makes it dizzy for her to realize the many contradictions that these worlds have in appearance, right? And how she orients herself through all those voices of different worlds. And then she says that really it is a matter of being motivated by love in order to undertake change. Love of self, love of people, love of life, which love basically gives the energy and compassion to act in the face of hardship. Loving gives us the motivation to dream the life and work that we want. So this, sorry, I think we have some interference again. Maybe I'll continue. So basically, it is about putting ourselves to service to the collective good through these intellectuals. Yeah. Oh, I forgot to mention that Bell Hooks is from the United States and Gloria Anzaldúa is from Mexico. Yeah. Oh, actually between the border of Mexico and the US. That is why he talks about walking into different cultures specifically, because the Anglo-Saxon culture of the US, the imposing one, and the Latin culture of Mexico, they really clash. Yeah. And then we enter specifically on the concept of love within peace studies as the discipline here in Europe, as we have been studying. And then maybe Adi would be the person to go to, because Adam Curl was the founder of the program where Adi got his PhD from in Bradford in the UK. Yeah, but what Adam Curl is doing is like, he worked as a conflict mediator for a very, very long time. And he had realized that if there's something that we must consider is that social change is always relationship centric. Social change actually happens when we are able to retain the good qualities of a relationship. And when we realize that social change starts with the interaction between each and every one of us, that is the quality of the relationship that will affect a larger change in the whole. And basically, Kurt talks about occupying a space that is like not inside oneself, but not fully outside. But it's always almost playing ping pong between inner feelings and being of service to the outer world. So this is what he talks when in the book, The Fragile Voice of Love. He talks about the dissolution of selfhood and of being of service to the alleviation of collective suffering. And I think it's fair. If we go back to Bell Hooks, she clearly delineated the forms of suffering in our contemporary society are capitalism, sexism, and racism. Yeah, but these are not the only forms of bigotry and violence that we have in this world. So it's important that maybe we can consider if there are other forms of suffering that we might be able to choose and address. We all have our own set of skills, and we might be able to tap on different issues of this world, right? And maybe I'd love if someone could read this quotation from Adam. Any volunteer?
I think I can.
Perfect.
All right. As I have tried over the past years to grapple with the problems of violence and injustice, I have realized increasingly how little I can do as I am. Without an inner evolution, I cannot act wisely. I cannot predict the results of my actions. I cannot understand the nature of the problems I am presumptuously attempting to solve because I view them through the same distorting lens as those who created them. Above all, I am the slave of my computer, with its stock of mind-cluttering ideas and information, and consequently am just as prone to violence as those I might wish to curb. The world is awash with political, economic, psychological, and technological panaceas, if I pronounce it correctly.
Yes.
Some of which I have tried with naive enthusiasm, but my experience has led me to the boring and old-fashioned conclusion that to act effectiveness and knowledge, I must be a knowledgeable and effective human being. I do not mean, of course, that I should do nothing until I am perfect. In that case, I would indeed do nothing. I must do what I can in the faith that if I try with inner stillness to act for the good, that my efforts will not be wasted, and in humility recognize their limitations.
So yeah, thank you so much. Alia, did I pronounce it right?
Yes.
Okay, for reading. So basically what Carl is talking about is that ultimately we have to do the kind of reflection of how we can be of service to other people and their causes and suffering. And this is important because we want to be, so to say, effective, right? We want to cause as little harm as possible, but we're never really sure 100%. So as long as we are trying and we are open to communicate what we are doing and working collectively in an open fashion, we might actually find the directions of how to navigate ourselves. So this is what's important, really, having at the same time the ability to act, be thinking critically, being of service, and being humble enough to realize that maybe we have limitations, maybe we will commit some mistakes, but we are eager and open to actually correct those mistakes. So that is where forms of reconciliation come from. If we commit mistakes, we have to be humble enough to recognize our mistakes and our limitations. Yeah, in an expensive form. And I think that also Lederach is an important author in peace studies. And basically, I think that you have seen a little bit of Lederach's thought with Jennifer Murphy at the beginning with conflict transformation, but Lederach's trying to shift conflict transformation from this idea that I am the expert that is going to educate you and basically do my tricks and my magic in order to people to be in peace with each other and stop doing violence. Lederach what's trying to do is really paying big attention to who are the people in the room, who are we working with, and being open to them to be in authentic dialogue with them. So basically he would say that love has not commonly been a topic of much discussion. This might be because of the burden of peace studies researchers and authors in the past. We were considered to represent a soft science that needed to find legitimacy among other disciplines. But to directly and openly discuss love is about entering the slippery slope of the intangibles that lie outside the scientific endeavor. And of course, we beg to differ. Love is an important element, as I have been building in this session. And love is fundamentally the choice of how we enter in relationship with what exists and the degree to which we keep our senses attentive to the ever-present but rarely heard appeal for open, authentic dialogue, which is bubbling in our surroundings, physical and social. So this is his understanding of the elastive, of working with people who is in the room. I mean, right now we are 37 in this space, and love would basically mean this radically democratic way of working with people in which we all have our voices and we're all eager to hear and learn from each other and ask for each other. And I think that if we really consider that, then we're really moving beyond Eurocentric and Western-centric perspective, because we're tapping in the richness of everybody in here, and we might actually start discussing expressions of love in Ubuntu Africa. Adebola has mentioned of the idea of community, right? And this idea of unconditional relating, but also the idea of buen vivir, good living in the Americas, in Abiyala, which talks about an ecocentric form of living in which we are respectful towards nature. Also the nonviolence of the Orang Asli, but in this case, Alberto's testimony and the source that we can have in here, but also in the Islamic world, the main tenets of Sufism, the realization of God in our everyday actions, which talks about an intrinsic spirituality. And if we're to tap on Buddhism, maybe we can talk about the 4 Brahma Viharas, which would be the 4 qualities of the heart, the sublime attitudes. Maybe Tabby, for instance, could talk about it, but really there's so much more for us to explore. And I will basically open the discussion round. We have roughly 10 minutes for you to share. Maybe we can go a little bit ahead with time if we need, but which other perspectives and authors must figure as explorers of the idea of love in peace and peace studies in general. And I think that with that, I can start my presentation, yeah? And just say terima kasih to everyone for enduring this 2 hours and 50 minutes, yeah? Thank you very much, everyone. Let's enter discussion now. Please feel free to unmute your microphones.
Okay, my mic is turned on now, yes. Well, thank you so much, Gigio, obrigado. And I was going to say, I love your talk. Absolutely love your presentation, as always, okay? It's just, yeah, it's lovely. I can use the word love in so many different forms, but you know what I mean. And what do the participants think? Anyone would like to make any comments about this?
Well,
you can, yeah, please do speak, yes.
Did I interrupt someone?
Rafia, yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Professor. To be very honest, I felt that the session was very engaging. You know, we got like 3 sessions in the breakout room, and that helped me interact with my co-participants and share my views with them. At the same time, I was exposed to, you know, their understanding of different perspectives. So yeah, it helped me evolve and grow, and it was very interesting. I didn't feel like, oh, I'm getting bored. So yeah, thanks for keeping up the energy all through the session. It was amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rafia.
Anyone else? Adebola, do you want to say something?
Yes, Prof. Thank you, Prof. Egidio, if I'm right. Yes, from the realm of international relations, you actually dilated on the theories of international relations. Precisely, you spoke about realism. For me, I've been wanting to see realism as a kind of theory or philosophy of hatred. While on the other hand, I see more of love in the principles, in the principles and philosophies of liberalism, because liberalism is a theory that is concerned with togetherness. It fosters more of global unity. Now, can I say that the transformation or a paradigm shift, it is what we are existing now, based on the theories of liberalism, especially when you look at interdependence realism, sociological liberalisms, even Republican liberalisms. You see all these atoms gathered together, talks much about global peace, global love. I want to say, and I want to believe that, the traditional love, especially within the realms of realism, belief center. It's a sort of centric love within the confines of a given territory, but basically to cater for the needs of those within that geopolitical zone. But my conclusions or my contribution is to say, or if I should put it as a question, should I begin to see principles of liberalism as a paradigm shift, as a transformation to global peace? Thank you.
Thank you, Adebola. I would ping pong back to you with a question and say liberalism, this idea of being free to do what for the sake of whom, right? Because if we look at the development of the idea of liberalism, it has specific cultural context. And it talks about, I think that if we go back to Jenny, John, and Carlos' presentation, they talk about the inception of liberalism. And now we realize that those discourses, they might look beautiful, that they might be promoting the idea that we are free to pursue our goals in the shape of happiness and well-being, etc., but at the expense of which other groups? Because liberalism is basically in its grounding, it is about the pursuit of private property and the exploitation of other peoples in order to basically accumulate money. So it's important that we're critical with this idea of liberalism, especially in response to another problematic understanding of international relations, which is realism. Yeah.
I think that's a good point, because one of the discourses that we find in countries like Australia and many other countries in the West, this focus on what is referred to as freedom of expression. And here we have far rights, members of the far right saying that they want to have the freedom of expression to express hate and express sentiments of exclusion, and this is really couched in terms of liberalism. So we have to be really very careful in terms of how we deal with such concepts that in many ways are imposed upon us. When I talk about us, I'm talking about the people who are in the non-Western context. Afifa, you have your hand up. Silakan.
Thank you, Prof. I just want to respond to the last question about any author that we should add. Can I?
Yes, please.
Because I'm from Islamic background, the author is Ibn al-Qayyim al-Jawzi. He has a book, Rawdatul Muhibbin. The meaning is the garden of lovers. So he bring out the idea that the emotions come from the love. So he bring out about 60 emotions that is derived from love. I'm specifically checking on sadness. How if something that don't have cannot relate to love, we won't be sad if lost. We wouldn't even care about it. There's many things around it not relate with love. Does not like how to say what we call it, cause sad. I mean, and also he said this sadness is caused by harm, and this harm, if we expect or suspect something will come to the event, I mean, in the prediction of, we become worried. So after this thing happen, in reality, then we become sad in terms of time frame. That's all what I want to share. Thank you.
Afifa, can you, oh, sorry. Yeah.
I was going to ask most probably the same as you, Alberto, ask her to write down the name of the author and the book in the chat.
Afifa, can you do that, please? Okay. Any more questions? Then, Mas Ari, do you want to say anything?
Okay, Prof.
Okay. So on behalf of the ICCTP team, Edigio, we thank you so much for this wonderful presentation and for adding yet to another dimension within this whole area of peace and conflict transformation. So thank you so much. And every time I look at you, you know what comes to my mind?
Love.
He is always
Yes,
a lovely person.
love comes to my mind, but there is also something else, and that is Tom Yum.
Yes, actually, I bought a jar of Tom Yum to prepare later on.
Did you
We share love for Tom
love
Yum.
Tom Yum?
Because I introduced Tom Yum to Gigio and Jenny and Carlos. So every time I travel from Melbourne to Castellon, I take a few jars of Tom Yum for them.
Yeah, it shifts from love to addiction most.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
thank you so much, Alberto. But let me also say thank you so much for the ICCTP team for organizing everything, for making this a smooth presentation and a smooth course for everyone.
Yeah.
It has been a joy to work with you all, and I really wish you the best in the very last day of course that you're going to have, and all the best to everyone. I will upload my presentation, and in there you can find my email if you want you to write back to me and if you have questions in the future. Yeah, but I really wish you all the best and that you're safe in this time of pandemics.
Yeah,
thank you so much, Gigio. And I should also point out that you are part of the WhatsApp group. So if any one of you have got any questions that you are dying, sorry, I shouldn't say the word dying to ask. Any questions that you are really, wanting to ask, Gigio, please do so. Yeah. And
great. Thank you so much.
okay.
Thank you, everyone.
So the participants, see you tomorrow.
Yeah.
And the days have gone so quickly, so we just have a few more days to bear us, and then you complete your course with the ICCTP, team, and we will wait till the end of the week to say our. We won't say goodbyes. We will just say see you later.
See you soon.
See you
okay.
soon.
See you tomorrow 9 a.m. Indonesian time.
9 a.m. So
Yeah,
Gigio,
thank
you
you.
stay. Yeah, Gigio, stay. We will go to another room.
Yeah.